The first conference called by the SS in December 1941 to comply with an order from Hermann Göring to eliminate the Jews of Europe was postponed for technical reasons. On January 20th, 1942, the conference finally convened in a Berlin suburb in a place called Am grossen Wannsee. The participants included Reinhard Heydrich, Gestapo chief Heinrich Muller, Adolf Eichmann, secretaries of state, interior, justice, the four-year plan, Göring's ministry, and the general government of Poland. Two top officials of the Ministry for the Occupied Eastern Territories, the Undersecretary of the Foreign Office, and top representatives of the party chancellery, the Reich Chancellery, and the Race and Resettlement Main Office. Heydrich reported on the steps taken to solve the Jewish question. He reported on Jewish emigration from the German Reich, which had reached 537,000 by October 1941. Heydrich centered his discussion on a statistical table that indicated a European Jewish population of 11 million. All would be included in the final solution.
Another possible solution of the problem has now taken the place of emigration, i.e. the evacuation of the Jews to the east, provided that the Fuhrer gives the appropriate approval in advance. These actions are, however, only to be considered provisional. But practical experience is already being collected, which is of the greatest importance in relation to the future final solution of the Jewish question. In the course of the practical execution of the final solution, Europe will be combed through from west to east. Germany proper, including the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, will have to be handled first due to the housing problem and additional social and political necessities. The evacuated Jews will first be sent group by group to so-called transit ghettos, from which they will be transported to the east. It is not intended to evacuate Jews over 65 years old, but to send them to an old age ghetto. Theresienstadt is being considered for this purpose. In addition to those age groups, of the approximately 280,000 Jews in Germany proper and Austria on 31 October 1941, approximately 30% are over 65 years old. Severely wounded veterans and Jews with war decorations, Iron Cross 1, will be accepted in the old age ghettos. With this expedient solution, in one fell swoop, many interventions will be prevented. The beginning of the individual larger evacuations will largely depend on military developments. Regarding the handling of the final solution in those European countries occupied and influenced by us, the appropriate expert of the Foreign Office will discuss the matter with the responsible official of the security police and SD. In Slovakia and Croatia, the matter is no longer so difficult, since the most substantial problems in this respect have already been brought near a solution. In Romania, the government has, in the meantime, also appointed a commissioner for Jewish affairs in order to settle the question in Hungary. It will soon be necessary to force an advisor for Jewish questions onto the Hungarian government. With regard to taking up preparations for dealing with the problem in Italy, I consider it opportune to contact the chief of police with a view to these problems. in occupied and unoccupied France, the registration Jews for evacuation will, in all probability, proceed without great difficulty.
When it comes to the annihilation of the Jews of Europe, everyone focuses on the Wannsee Conference. But as always, there are issues involved. Who gave the actual order to exterminate 6 million Jews? When was it given? At Wannsee or at some other time? Who was ultimately responsible for the mass murder of European Jewry, as well as 5 million non-Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, and Jehovah's Witnesses? Did Hitler personally order the genocide? Would there have been a Holocaust but for Adolf Hitler? Do we have any written documents from Hitler ordering the mass murder? Was there ever an order of the Fuhrer, a Fuhrerbefehl? Oddly enough, it's difficult to link the genocide with Hitler himself. Some ask, might it have been a group decision? Might others have been complicit in that decision? Who might have belonged to such a group? There was, for example, Alfred Rosenberg, an influential member of the Nazi Party who held several important government posts and who is considered one of the main authors of key Nazi ideological creeds, including its racial theory. There was Heinrich Muller, head of the SS, considered by many to have been the architect of the actual genocide. Himmler, it is said, gave flesh and bones to Hitler's plans. He had sole jurisdiction over the Jewish question. Consider, for example, Project Lebensborn, in which pure Aryan women were sent off with Nazi officers to spawn a new master race. The program was Hitler's brainchild, but Himmler carried it out. Might the genocide have proceeded similarly? Hitler dreaming it up and Himmler enacting it? After all, it was Himmler who had sole jurisdiction over the final solution following November 1939 and Kristallnacht. Nor was Himmler sitting in an office like a good bureaucrat. He was out in the field, actively overseeing the killing. Next came Reinhard Heydrich, one of 14 SS generals directly beneath Himmler. Heydrich was head of the RSHA, the Security Main Office, part of which was the SD, the Security Service. Heydrich was the most powerful single individual after Himmler, and he was one man who actually looked the part of an Aryan, tall, blonde, blue-eyed. But in spite of the fact that it was Heydrich who chaired the Wannsee Conference, we should recognize that he was not in charge of the death camps. Heydrich certainly was responsible for the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing squads who murdered over 1 million Jews on the Russian front at the beginning of the German invasion of the Soviet Union. But we should also point out that Heydrich was assassinated before the first death camp went into operation. Then there was Heinrich Muller, head of the notorious Gestapo, the political secret state police of Nazi Germany. Muller was directly involved in the extermination of the Jews and was personally present at the Wannsee Conference. Still, it's fair to ask whether the Holocaust would ever have come about without the maniacal determination of Hitler, and Hitler alone, to perpetrate genocide. Getting into Hitler's mind is no easy task, but it's clear that for him, anti-Semitism amounted to a religion of sorts. For him, it brought about a perverse kind of redemption. Call it redemptive anti-Semitism. Sounds bizarre, but he believed that this form of racism would redeem humanity. We can even make a case that he saw himself as a kind of Messiah. He harbored a messianic complex, as though he were a god. Bear in mind, Hitler wore glasses, but never in public. He was not married, and the public knew nothing of his mistress, Eva Braun. After all, who could marry a god? And, as he wrote in Mein Kampf, he was, by defending himself against the Jew, doing the will of the Almighty. And while he dictated Mein Kampf to his deputy, Rudolf Hess, he was definitely the author of every word. So devoted was he to his anti-Semitism that his friends even said that if Hitler ever invites you to dinner, don't mention the Jews or he'll start ranting. Putting all of this together, it's well possible to argue that notwithstanding the many leaders of the Nazi Party, Hitler was almost single-handedly responsible for the Holocaust, that he was the motivating factor. But still we have to ask, when was the intention to murder the Jews of Europe actually established? Was it in Hitler's mind as early as Mein Kampf? Or did it evolve? This is where we encounter division among Holocaust scholars between intentionalists and functionalists. The latter argue that the genocide came about as an outgrowth or a function of the Second World War. In other words, World War II was a prerequisite of sorts for the Holocaust. Intentionalists argue that mass murder was the clear intent of Adolf Hitler all along, and extreme intentionalists argue for the earliest possible date with regard to when the idea of genocide was actually hatched. Consider the testimony of retired Major Joseph Hell, who had been a journalist in the 1920s and early 30s. He recorded that when he met Hitler in 1922, asking, "What do you want to do to the Jews once you have full discretionary powers?" To which Hitler responded, "Once I am really in power, my first and foremost task will be the annihilation of the Jews. As soon as I have the power to do so, I will have gallows built in rows, as many as traffic allows. Then the Jews will be hanged indiscriminately, and they will remain hanging until they stink. They will hang there as long as the principles of hygiene permit. As soon as they have been untied, the next batch will be strung up, and so on down the line, until the last Jew in Munich has been exterminated. Other cities will follow suit, until all Germany has been completely cleansed of Jews." How authoritative is this source? How accurate? If Hitler really declared that early that he intended to exterminate the Jews, it would be a huge point for the intentionalists. Of course, we do have Hitler's words in Mein Kampf, which, while they don't mention extermination, certainly illumine his mindset toward the Jewish people. Whenever the decision on mass murder was taken, how did it move from ideology to practice? Was it a mere function of bureaucracy? Was there a power struggle between different groups as a result of which the final solution evolved? And from the standpoint of the intentionalists, it's fair to ask, how do we define intent? Did talk of genocide in the abstract indicate a clear plan to carry it out? And if there were a plan, where's the documentation? Another problem is that in July 1943, Hitler's deputy, Martin Bormann, issued an order that any document referring to the final solution be destroyed. Nevertheless, the original order may well have been an oral command to begin with. After all, Hitler didn't need to give written orders. His word was enough. We should recall Hitler's prophecy speech of January 30th, 1939, which has been used as evidence for the intentionalists. In it, Hitler basically said, if war, then annihilation of the Jews. It can be argued that with the outbreak of World War II, Hitler's intention became firm. But it wasn't until Germany's invasion of Russia that a turning point seems to have been reached. From the Nazi viewpoint, it was easier to begin there than in a more civilized country. Moreover, the fog of war provided perfect cover for mass murder. And that's evidence for the functionalists. It's also curious to note that at the Wannsee Conference, it was declared that Europe will be combed of Jews from west to east. In reality, however, it was just the opposite. The genocide began as far east as Russia and proceeded westward. Whether we agree with the intentionalists or the functionalists, the one thing worth noting is that Hitler himself may be tied to a series of meetings that we know took place. February 24th, 1941, 4 people met in Berlin: Hitler, Himmler, Göring, and Rosenberg. The meeting was logged, but we don't know what was discussed. There may have been an oral command to exterminate the Jews. April 1941, the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing squads of the SS, were formed. June 17th, 1941, a debriefing in Berlin, a progress report on the extermination. In addressing the heads of the Einsatzgruppen, Heinrich declared orally that this comes from Hitler himself.
No obstacle should be placed before the efforts at purging undertaken by anti-communist or anti-Jewish circles in the territories soon to be occupied. On the contrary, they should be helped to occur without leaving any trace. They should be intensified if necessary and channeled in the proper direction, but without the local self-protection units later being able to refer to any orders or any political aims and objectives that had been laid down.
In other words, the command to commit genocide was not to be written down so that no trace would be left. On July 31st, 1941, Göring sent the following order.
To Gruppenführer Heinrich, supplementing the task assigned to you by the decree of January 24, 1939, to solve the Jewish problem by means of emigration and evacuation in the best possible way, according to present conditions. I hereby charge you to carry out preparations as regards organizational, financial, and material matters for a Gesamtlösung, total solution of the Jewish question in all the territories of Europe under German occupation, where the competency of other central organizations touches on this matter. These organizations are to collaborate. I charge you further to submit to me as soon as possible a general plan of the administrative material and financial measures necessary for carrying out the desired Endlösung, final solution of the Jewish question.
Here, final solution is used for the first time to describe mass murder. This, it is argued, is the most important single document prior to the Wannsee Conference, being the closest thing we have to a Fuhrerbefehl, an order of the Fuhrer. Through all this, it's clear that the final solution wasn't conceived at Wannsee. The order was Hitler's, and Hitler's alone. He gave it. He was the motivating factor. How early his actual intent to implement genocide is the lingering question. In the final analysis, are the intentionalists or the functionalists right? On that, the jury is still out.